The most powerful military in the world was not blind for long. That disconnect, which soon became clear, was at the heart of the crisis. At 11:51 p.m. on a Tuesday in November, after several delayed notifications, the president was told a possible North Korean intercontinental ballistic missile was detected over the Pacific. The notification came long after the launch, marking the first major timeline lag. The missile was capable of reaching the continental United States. Complicating matters, early warning coverage was degraded. The main satellite that should have detected the launch was dead. Tracking data to the Pentagon was late, incomplete, and unreliable. During this confusion, there was one more detail. By the time the president was notified, the missile may have already splashed down. Nobody could say that with confidence yet. For the next several minutes, while confusion mounted, the command system was behind the real situation, trying to figure out if a North Korean ICBM was still in flight. Meanwhile, the answer was moving through a warning chain that was not designed for this kind of failure. This was not a software fault. It was not a bad radar return. It was not one confused officer misjudging a screen. This stemmed from an orbital debris cloud, a disabled missile warning satellite, and a North Korean launch during the gap. But the crisis did not begin in Washington. It began 850 kilometers above Earth. China had conducted what it described as a satellite disposal operation against an aging weather satellite in low Earth orbit. Initially, the expectation was bad, but manageable. Models predicted about 2,000 trackable fragments, dangerous but within what US and Allied systems planned for. However, the events that unfolded deviated sharply from those expectations. Instead, the satellite did not simply break apart. It shattered. Tracking revealed over 3,600 fragments, plus an uncounted cloud of smaller debris. In orbit, size is deceptive. A piece the size of a marble can disable a satellite. A baseball-sized piece of debris at orbital speed is not just trash. It behaves as a weapon. The fragments spread along paths intersecting other satellites. One of the satellites put at risk was USA 184. To the public, that sounds like a serial number. To the US military, it was part of the Space-Based Infrared System, or SBIRS, the group of satellites that detects the heat bloom from ballistic missile launches. Systems like SBIRS represent one of the quiet foundations of nuclear deterrence. Before radar tracks the missile, before commanders classify the launch, before the president is briefed, satellites such as these are supposed to see the rocket motor light up. They create the warning time, and warning time is the entire game. USA 184 was not the whole system. The US relies on overlapping sensors, backup systems, ground-based radars, and support from allies like Japan and Australia. These can help fill gaps and strengthen detection. Redundancy is not full capability. When a primary node goes down, the picture does not vanish. It degrades. Warning shifts from detection to educated guesses. Confidence dropped. It moves from a distinct timeline to one that has to be pieced together after the fact. The Space Operations Center recognized the developing collision hazard. They had approximately 38 minutes of warning before the debris reached USA 184. At first glance, that sounds like time. In orbital mechanics, that's almost no time. The satellite could not be moved out of danger in time. With just 38 minutes between the warning and debris impact, warnings were sent, backup plans activated, and other sensors assigned to monitor. Yet the impact remained imminent. Ultimately, the impact was going to happen. At 11:04 p.m. Eastern Time, USA 184 went dark. At 11:04 p.m. Eastern Time, USA 184 went dark. This event opened a 4-7-minute gap in primary detection coverage over the Pacific, shifting the timeline into the degraded warning window. 15 minutes after USA 184 went offline, now at 11:19 p.m. North Korea launched an ICBM. This marks a shift in the timeline from satellite loss to adversary action. This moment is where the pleasant assumption fails. LS. Most contingency planning treats technical failures and adversary provocations as separate categories. A satellite outage is a technical problem. a North Korean missile launch is a political problem. They happen for separate reasons, with different timelines and decision chains, but in the context of modern conflict, that distinction is dangerous. That has not been publicly established. Even without proof of coordination, linking adversaries' timelines creates challenges. In unclear cases, responsibility becomes not just an intelligence issue, but also a policy problem. Determining intent combines technical evidence, satellite data, intercepted communications, and behavior analysis, while adversaries exploit confusion. As leaders must respond during uncertainty, deterrence, and escalation risks heighten, the question becomes even harder. Indeed, the question is worse. Yet, what if they did not need to? What if the mere existence of a degraded warning window was enough? An adversary might not need total destruction, only a brief moment where the system lags behind events. The missile North Korea launched was a Hwasong-18, a solid-fueled, road-mobile intercontinental ballistic missile. Liquid-fueled missiles need visible preparation time. Solid-fueled missiles move, raise, and fire faster. There's less warning before launch, there's less time to interpret intent, there's less room for error after detection. The missile flew steeply upward, landing in the Sea of Japan instead of crossing Japan or heading to the US. But the system didn't know that immediately. At the moment of detection, a lofted ICBM test and the early phase of a real attack can look uncomfortably similar. You need trajectory measurements. You need confidence. You need time. But time was what the warning system lost most critically. SAINT, with USA 184 down, the first usable detection came not from the primary infrared satellite, but from secondary systems, older infrared sensors and ground-based radars, including Cobra Dane in the Aleutians. Those systems eventually saw enough to identify the launch. They saw it late. The missile was detected at 11:42 p.m. That was 23 minutes post-launch. In a nuclear warning, 23 minutes is not a delay. It is a structural failure. A North Korean ICBM on a standard attack trajectory could reach parts of the United States in roughly 30 to 40 minutes, depending on target and profile. If detection comes 23 minutes late, the president may not have half an hour. The president may have single digits, 7 minutes, 10 minutes. There may be even less time after the message moves up the chain. Every minute lost early compresses decisions at the end. At 11:44 p.m., the National Military Command Center received the detection notification. At 11:46, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs was reached. His first question was the only question that mattered. Is it real or is it a test? The answer, we don't know yet. That is the sentence nuclear command systems are designed to avoid. Not because uncertainty is rare. Uncertainty is constant. But because the system is supposed to contain it before it reaches the top, the president is not supposed to receive raw panic. The president should receive a classified assessment. Launch detected. Trajectory assessed. Threat level determined. Recommended options prepared. But the degraded warning broke the sequence. The missile had been in the air for more than 20 minutes before the command chain had a usable picture. Trajectory examination was still catching up. The infrared data was degraded. The radar picture was partial. At 11:47 p.m., the White House Situation Room was notified. At 11:51 p.m., the president was briefed. The message was not, North Korea has conducted a test and the missile has landed. The message was, a possible North Korean ICBM launch has been detected. Early warning coverage is degraded due to satellite damage from Chinese debris. Tracking is ongoing, and assessment is still underway. At this stage, the part that matters is here. The missile had likely already splashed down. Pacific Command's trajectory assessment placed splashdown in the Sea of Japan around 11:49 p.m. Eastern. Additional confirmation followed quickly. But confirmation does not become presidential knowledge the instant it exists somewhere in the system. It has to move. Radar data has to be interpreted. Reports have to be reconciled. The assessment must reach the correct node. The node has to update the situation room. The situation room has to update the president. That process took minutes. In normal life, minutes are nothing. In a nuclear warning chain, minutes are the boundary between command and reflex. From the first Pentagon detection notification at 11:44 to the president's update at 11:56, about 13 minutes passed as the timeline progressed through system uncertainty and resolution. Add from the president's first notification at 11:51 to the update at 11:56, the person with launch authority spent roughly 5 minutes inside the ambiguity, defining a crucial segment in the decision-making timeline, TY. That distinction mattered. The president was not personally confused for 13 minutes. In reality, the warning architecture was. And that is worse in a different way, because the real vulnerability wasn't only one person lacking information. An entire command system ran behind the event. The missile was already over, but the decision chain had not caught up. This is where accidental wars live. Not in the dramatic movie version, where someone sees a flashing red button and panics. They live in the gap between detection and interpretation, between launch detected and threat resolved, between what happened in the sky and what the president has been told. And in this case, that gap was created by something no one had fully stress tested. A missile launch during a degraded satellite warning window caused by foreign orbital debris. No single decision failed. That is the disturbing part. Space operators warned whom they could warn. Pacific Command tracked what it could track. The NMCC notified upward rather than waiting for perfect information. The Situation Room passed the warning along. Each individual choice was defensible. The seam was in the architecture. The system assumed that primary warning coverage would be there when the missile launched. It is assumed that if a satellite failed, the failure would be handled as a technical event. It is assumed that if North Korea launches a missile, the event would be interpreted through the normal sensor chain. But the world did not respect those categories. China's debris field degraded the sensor chain. North Korea launched inside the degradation window. The United States had to interpret one adversary's missile through the damage caused by another adversary's space activity. And China said almost nothing. Beijing characterized the operation as routine. It did not acknowledge that the debris field had damaged a US early warning satellite. It did not acknowledge that the resulting coverage gap overlapped with a North Korean ICBM launch. It did not have to. That silence was strategically useful. If the debris strike was accidental, China could deny intent. If the debris field was deliberately excessive, China could deny that too. If North Korea's timing was coordinated, opportunistic, or simply coincidental, the ambiguity protected everyone except the United States. Because you cannot respond cleanly to what you cannot attribute. You cannot publicly punish coordination you cannot prove. You cannot escalate over an accident if the other side insists it was routine. And you cannot ignore the fact that the outcome looked like a rehearsal. This is what gray zone conflict looks like in orbit. Not a giant space battle, not lasers firing across the sky, not satellites exploding over cities. A debris field, a disabled sensor, a degraded warning chain, a missile launch inside the window, and a nuclear command system forced to make sense of it all after the timeline had already slipped. The lesson is not that America was helpless. It was not. The missile was detected. The test was resolved. The president was updated. No war started. But that is a thin comfort, because the system worked only after operating late. And the next version of this scenario may not involve a lofted test into the Sea of Japan. It may involve multiple launches, or a cyber attack on communications, or a second satellite failure, or a regional crisis where everyone is already expecting escalation. The danger is not that the United States loses all warning at once. The danger is that the warning becomes uncertain at the exact moment certainty matters most. This is why the US Space Force has been working to use more satellites, smaller satellites, and reduce single points of failure. Exquisite satellite matters too much, then one debris strike matters too much. A larger constellation is harder to blind. But architectures take years to build. Procedures can change faster. To fix this vulnerability, specific procedural improvements are needed. First, notification rules for degraded detection should be made simpler. When sensor coverage is compromised, A clear and unified alert must go out right away to senior officials, explaining both the nature of the gap and its expected impact. Second, the warning system should use real-time decision tools like automated impact assessments and response checklists to help leaders quickly understand the situation and reduce confusion under pressure. Third, regular scenario-based drills that simulate degraded warning, including participation from different agencies, should be required so everyone in the command chain can practice working together quickly in unclear, high-stakes situations. And the procedure question may be the more urgent one. How does the president get notified when detection and characterization stop arriving together? How does the system communicate uncertainty without creating panic? How does it distinguish a test from an attack when the sensor layer is damaged? How does it avoid briefing the most powerful person on Earth about a missile that has already hit the water? That is the real story. Not that China created debris. Not that North Korea launched a missile. Not even that one American satellite went dark. The real story is that modern deterrence relies on timing so precise that losing just a few minutes can turn a test into a crisis. When the warning chain slows down, the risk is not just confusion in operations. It additionally weakens the ability to respond credibly. Weaknesses in timing can create moments when adversaries might think they can get away with escalation, or that uncertainty will freeze decision-making at the top. These gaps can lead to risky moves, mistakes, or even attempts to take advantage of confusion, thereby damaging deterrence and increasing the risk of accidental escalation. Space does not announce its vulnerabilities. It demonstrates them. And for 47 minutes over the Pacific, the United States got a demonstration. The question is whether the system learned fast enough before the next window opens. To turn analysis into action, policymakers should focus on two urgent steps. First, accelerate the launch of increasingly resilient satellite networks and ensure that procedures for handling degraded warnings are practiced regularly at the highest levels. Second, set clear rules for agency coordination and for rapid, clear communication to leaders when detection windows are compromised. The next crisis may not give a second chance. These gaps need to be closed now.